Welcome back to We're Not Your Typical.
Today we have Jess on the show with a late diagnosis of autism and ADHD. She has a lovely son called Jude who is non-verbal, 11 years old.
Jess has published her own book called The Autistic Mum. This can be found on Amazon. Enjoy the show.
So we've got the lovely Jessica with us today. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I think we just need to dive straight in. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I'm 40 years old. I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD age 37, 38.
Wow.
Because my son is autistic, he's nonverbal. He's 11 next month. There was always something different about me, but it was just part of my personality. And then the more I learned after he was diagnosed and the different courses I went on and I seen how it can present in females in high functioning ways, I realised that was an issue for me. So I had therapy, got referred to be assessed, and I got diagnosed with both, a couple of years ago.
Did you feel like you were going to get both of your diagnoses?
To be honest, because I'd only learnt about autism, I knew by the time the assessment come around, because it took a year, I knew that I would get that diagnosis. I didn't know anything about ADHD because my son at the time didn't have that diagnosis like most people. Mm-hmm. I thought it was just naughty boys that are, climbing the walls, can't sit still, and I'm not like that. That my therapist, after I'd been diagnosed with autism, said, "I'm surprised that you wasn't dual diagnosed." And I said, "What's that?" And she explained. So then I researched that in females and realised that actually, you don't have to be. In fact, a lot of the time, you're not hyperactive physically. You're hyperactive in your mind, which is definitely what it is for me.
Sorry to butt in. That's exactly like my son.
Yeah.
He's not hyper in what he does or how he does it. It's his brain and his mind.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good way to...
I've never looked at it like that.
That's really, really great for people that don't have ADHD or maybe are on the pathway to understand.
Particularly in females, that's how it presents more than the physical hyperactivity. And in fact, in the rest of the world, when you get a diagnosis of that, it's actually ADD, not ADHD, because they take the H out for hyperactivity, because that isn't the biggest, trait, actually, which most people think it is, but that's just misinformation.
Because I'm convinced that my son is ADD, but they did diagnose him with the ADHD, but he's not hyperactive in himself at all. He can sit still.
He's chill, isn't he?
He's chill. But in his brain... 25 million things are going on at the same time. He can't concentrate on one thing, but you wouldn't know it looking at him.
Yeah, that's it. It's like the metaphor of the swan on the lake, paddling underneath, but on the surface, it seems fine. That's what I would say. And again, that's the same with me. It looks like I'm calm and collected, but inside it's just crazy.
Do you think your son's diagnosis led you to maybe your diagnosis?
Oh,
Did
definitely.
you see traits in... I know everything presents differently. Yeah. But do you think you saw some things in him that you saw in yourself?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Like I said, so when he was diagnosed, I then went on lots of courses with other parents and obviously neurodivergent specialists and learn all the different ways that it presents. And there was one course in particular where they had a PowerPoint and they had, this is what the world would look like if everyone was autistic. And it was just things like we wouldn't be forced to make eye contact. We wouldn't, we would tell the truth and not say things that had a different meaning.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be ulterior motives. We wouldn't really lie. Just things like that, which is how I've always been, which people have took the wrong way all my life.
Too honest.
Because that's not the way society works.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why. That's just pretty obvious to me. I often don't get sarcasm or jokes. I'm very black and white. Again, I've always been that way. So, it was like, oh, wow, so that could be. And then I knew, obviously, at that point that not all the time, but a lot of the time, neurodivergence is genetic. And a high percentage of children, one of the parents or both, or somewhere in the family, there will be the same.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, when a child gets diagnosed, the parent should also be assessed.
I do hear this a lot,
just
actually.
as a, well, I mean, it'd save a lot of time if it could all just be done at the same time. But
they do genetic testing anyway, don't they, on the child? We
yes,
that,
but
so.
it just would never say, oh, it's from mum or dad, or where it's come from.
Because there's definitely people in my family.
Mine's definitely come from my husband.
Yeah, as well as me, there is people on both sides of the family that are obviously older, in the 50s, that, you know, struggled in school and different things, that when you look back now, they definitely were autistic. But obviously back then,
it wasn't such a thing,
it was a recognised condition, but it was the same when I was in school in the 90s. It was a recognised condition, but only if it was on the more severe end.
Yes.
So if you were non-verbal, not hitting your milestones, things like that. Whereas now we know that that's not, you know, high functioning. I don't like that term because it sort of makes it seem as if we cope a lot better when actually we often are not. It's just internal.
Haven't people stopped using high functioning and low functioning now?
Yeah, I mean, we should do, but I mean, there's really not any other way to
express
describe it. Exactly, that's the only way you can say it.
And I think people need to still understand that term, because we as parents, and I think you would feel the same before your diagnosis, when we look at other children or adults that have a diagnosis and they're fully conversational and they go to a mainstream school without a one-to-one support, we all question, well, how are you autistic when our children have had regressions, don't speak, can't function in a typical way? So I think the term, and we don't need to go into controversial conversation, but it still kind of needs to be there for people to understand that the spectrum is so huge, and it's accepting everyone's diagnosis.
Yeah, but then you also have, on the other hand, you also need to understand that high functioning doesn't mean that internally
it's
you're
more
high
bearable.
Functioning.
So true.
I mean, again, in my opinion, and I think it will happen eventually. So obviously years ago, they used to diagnose more high functioning people with Asperger's, which is obviously now isn't used. But they do need to diagnose with some kind of level, because at the moment it's just one blanket autistic spectrum condition or disorder across the board, whereas there are very different ends of the spectrum. So obviously, you know, our children, my son's non-verbal, so he obviously struggles a lot with communication, whereas like you said, I can go and have a conversation. I've coped up until I was 38 without a diagnosis, and there's a lot of people like that, but we still do need support, but different kinds of support. So there does need to be some kind of scale.
I think there is a scale though. I think there's a scale of, well, in my opinion, there's autism, and then there's autism with global development delay.
Does
your son have the global delay?
No, he has ADHD as well, which he got after I was diagnosed because, again, he's not hyperactive physically, but the ways in which I feel ADHD affects me, I saw in him once I had learned about it and been diagnosed. So then I got his diagnosis because his school agreed as well, just so that he's then got that for going forward, because obviously you need an ADHD diagnosis before you can get medication. You can't just get that from your GP. So in the future, if he needs medication to help him, which I take medication.
It's extra support for him.
Yeah.
If he needs it.
So we got that for him. And again, just so people can understand him a little bit better as well, because all the ways in which he struggles or might behave isn't just because of autism. It's ADHD as well.
So when you say he's non-verbal, are we saying no words, no sounds, few words?
No words. No.
Okay.
He makes sounds. He's not quiet. He's not shy. He's confident. He makes sounds. So if he wants pizza, he'll say "puh puh," or he has a thing where he always wants us to ask if we're happy, and he'll say "ha ha ha," and he wants us to repeat "happy" back to him. He can say yeah, so if I'll say yeah, he'll say yeah, but that's just because it's it's easy.
Because he's copying you, or whether it would be in context. If you said to him,
it is
deliver
in
pizza,
context, but it's more that
It's a letter.
Yeah, it's a letter.
Like a
it's not really a
not
word.
So did he hit all his milestones if he hasn't got global development delay? Obviously, other than the speech and
which
communication.
milestones?
As a child?
eye contact, pointing, social.
He has eye contact with me. So that was something I didn't recognise. That was pointed out to me by other people because he'd always had eye contact with me.
Yeah.
And that's still the same now. He doesn't, socially, no, but he does love being around other kids. He just doesn't play with them. But he does love being around other kids, and he'll watch them, and particularly his cousins, who he's obviously been around his whole life. He loves being with them.
Does he have any siblings?
No,
Okay.
he's an only child.
And does he have a father?
Yes.
That you all live together?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently going through a divorce at the moment, but we're still living together while our new house is getting sorted. But yeah,
do you
we've
think
always
that will
lived
change
together.
things for him, or do you think he wouldn't actually understand that? Does he have a good understanding?
No, I don't think so. He doesn't have the social awareness. So, for example, my niece is 7, and girls, neurotypically or not, are more socially aware than boys.
Definitely.
So she, if any of her friends in school's parents are getting divorced, she'll come home and she'll be like devastated and say to me sister, you're not going to get divorced. And she understands.
Yeah.
Jude, that's my son, doesn't have that understanding, but I've been preparing him saying, families don't have to live together, because he does understand.
Yeah.
Understands a lot more than what we think he does.
Always.
So I tell him more as if, he understands everything. And that families don't always have to live together. He's still going to be seeing his dad. His dad is keeping the family home. So I'm happy about that. So he's going to be going back to there.
In a safe place, a familiar place as well.
So the new house, he will be with me, which being with me is his comfort zone. So he'll be fine.
And is that going to be nearby?
Yes, it's literally 2 minutes,
Perfect.
over the road.
So that's comfortable for him then. Yeah.
And we made sure of that. And we've always been a team, me and his dad. I know a lot of couples, spouses struggle with that, especially when it's more severe autism. We've always had our roles with Jude, and we've always co-parented really well. And that will continue. He is a great dad.
That's lovely.
Yeah, so we will do whatever. It's not been easy, obviously still living together.
Yeah.
But he is number one.
Yeah,
and obviously with any child, it doesn't just stop at 18, but particularly with Jude, that's not going to happen. So he's always going to need additional support and things like that. And we understand him more than anyone else, and vice versa. So yeah, we will be very much making the effort to co-parent well and stay. Well, we're still family.
Yeah,
so
of course. So Jude, what age does he present? He's 11 next week, you said?
Yeah, 11 next month.
Next month, sorry. So what age is he representing?
Yeah, so I'd say around 5. He has a good level of understanding, which he's built up over the years. He didn't used to have that age-appropriate understanding. But, and I know everyone can't do this, but from a very young age, because I knew something was different from 18 months old, he wasn't copying nursery rhymes, clapping, waving, things like that. And even though I had no experience with autism, I could just tell there was something different. But I still always made sure to take him to places and not use it as an excuse that, because it's just something different, or he won't like this, he won't be comfortable. We lived in London, so we're from just outside Liverpool. So we had to go out to be around other people. So I took him to play groups and, music groups, and for meals and shopping, and he had to come to everywhere with me. So he happily goes everywhere now. So in that sense, he might seem older because he's very comfortable doing that. He could go literally to the nicest restaurant and he'd behave very well. On a flight, he can go on holiday, which some autistic children won't because of the changes, as long as I explain everything to him. But again, this is going off topic. This is another thing that I speak about often is because I'm autistic and ADHD.
You can understand him more.
People often ask how that is, and it does have its struggles. But yeah, it's a benefit, as in I understand the need for him to have a routine, the need for me to repeat what we're doing now and next.
That's why you're probably a really good duo as well, because you thrive off routine together.
Yes.
And that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So he probably knows as well.
Yes, well, and I do say it to
connection.
him. I don't, it's not something I feel like neurodivergent families need to talk about constantly, but it does need to be, autism and neurodivergence and ADHD need to be words that are openly mentioned, so they're not seen as bad words.
Sure, or foreign words as such. It should be in everyday language.
Yes, exactly. So I have spoken to him about that. I tell him, particularly if he ever has days where he's upset and I can tell that he's overwhelmed, and I understand how that feels. And as a child, he obviously doesn't understand that. So I will then say to him that Mummy and Jude have got, the same kind of brain, and our brains are different to most people's, and how that's special and what benefits that has. But it just means that sometimes we might struggle with certain things, just because I want him to know that, it's just a difference. It's nothing wrong. It's nothing that's wrong with us. It's not strange. And there are benefits from that. Of course
there are. How other ways does he communicate? So obviously he can use letters, which you can, as his mummy, knows very much what he's saying.
Yeah.
But to school, and obviously we'll talk about school as well, or to his cousins or anything like that, does he use a device? Does he use Makaton or signing or anything like that?
So he's got a device. He's got an iPad that's got an app, Prolo to go. There's different apps. That one is the best one for him, and eventually as he gets older he will be able to type on that as well, and that verbally will then speak what he said. And he'll nod for yes, shake his head for no. You can very much tell what he wants and what he doesn't want. He's very able to
see. This is what really fascinates me, and I don't know whether I'm ever going to get my head around it or whether it's right or wrong, but he understands. He can nod for yes, he can shake for no. Why can't they say it?
Because and eventually, hopefully he will. It's just there's different connections in the brain that have to form and connect together to give us the ability to form speech and to form words. And those, they're often called highways, are not connected yet.
So they physically can't say the word.
Yes, physically, but not because of a physical problem, which sometimes there is, like speech dyspraxia and things like that, or tongue-tied. They're physical problems.
And this is like cognitive.
This is cognitive, yeah. So those connections in the brain haven't been formed to give him the ability to speak. But at any age, the brain can change.
I know, you do hear this.
I just hope they don't suffer. That they're not suffering.
Well, some do, but you can see that in the behaviour, the frustration and the behaviour, because can you imagine, that's something I try and not think about, but can you imagine having that understanding but not being able to speak? It must be...
That's what I mean.
But then again, if you've never had it, it's not like us now losing our speech. Yeah. That'd be more frustrating. Yeah. And we're really lucky, touch wood, that Jude doesn't ever show frustration, to be honest. There are some children and adults that do, but he doesn't, because I think we pretty much revolve around him. My life certainly does. So I make sure that he's always in a space where people understand him, and he isn't, he feels like he's not understood, because that's something I really hard. Don't want.
Yeah. I just think you have to give yourself a pat on the back as well, because I really do also think it's the way that you parent. And I think that you've, from a young age, as you've just said, have grown up with him, learning to accept, understand, and just it kind of is what it is, and not made anything, it almost seems like you haven't made anything negative. It's all a positive.
Yeah, because...
And that's what his behaviour seems.
And that was a
great.
Conscious decision, though. You do have to consciously do that. And it's hard, because every parent will know, even though I knew that he was autistic, when he got the diagnosis, I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
more so just because of the stigma that the rest of the world has, and because I know that in some ways it will be a struggle for him. But I then just consciously thought to myself, and I'm really good at decompartmentalizing. I think that's like the neurodivergence. I can put something in a box. And I just thought, you're going to wish his childhood away, and it goes so quick, as we know. And he's going to be 21 before you know it. And you're going to think, I've just wasted watching him being who he is, wishing that he could speak, or thinking about what you could do to help him, and all those things. So I just had to relax and just think about it positively and just put a positive spin on everything, because there's no other way. And all of us as parents, neurodivergent or not, it's our job to help your child reach their full potential. And that is most important in younger years. So I just do that about everything.
Great explanation. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Maybe I need to take a leaf out of your book.
Yeah, and I do it as an adult. And that's it. And this is all in my book. How I wasn't always that way, but that I went through mental health struggles before I got diagnosed, and I had to pull myself out of it, and that was how I did it. And I very much now I'm just like that in everyday life.
You implement it into everyday
life. It
must be exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It's exhausting being neurodivergent anyway, even though it might not look it on the outside, we were saying. Yeah. But again, on bad days, especially, around PMT, hormonal, because I'm perimenopausal as well. So that just, adds problems. If I do have bad days, which are quite rare now, I have notes wrote down to read, to just tell myself that, experience has shown me that this will pass. Because it's because of the chemicals. We already are lower in estrogen, women with ADHD. So when that estrogen drops before your period, there's a lot around hormones and ADHD in women that is still being researched now. That is why a lot of women, if they haven't been diagnosed when they have neurodivergent children, they're often diagnosed when they hit menopause or perimenopause, because that's when it becomes a struggle. Yeah. Because the hormones fluctuate that much. The
body, the brain,
it's such a struggle. But like I said, so I tell myself, but I am, and I genuinely wouldn't like my brain to be any different, because it's got me where I am.
And it's got you to your book, which I'd love to hear more about.
Yes, and I'm proud of who I am, and I've been able to help Jude because of that. Don't get me wrong, would I like to have a neurotypical brain sometimes for a day just to have a rest, and some peace? Yes, but also, I'm the one that people come to if they've got a problem, if they need things sorted, organised, and I like to do that.
I just think you've got you might as well just have acceptance on your forehead. Like that's how you come across, and it's really, really refreshing.
Yeah,
because I feel like a lot of us as parents need to accept more.
Yes,
and it's easier said than done, of course. And I'm sure there's been many struggles along the way.
Yeah.
And I think our children are younger than Jude, so we've still got that journey. Yeah. But I think once you've reached where you are, so it seems, it's almost like life is just great.
It's best, like you seem best for us, and it's best for them. Because, no one in any situation is going to knock on your door and give you happiness. We have to make it happen.
Have to make it work.
So you mentioned the book. All of this is in the book as well. So it's a little bit of a memoir about me at the beginning and my background, childhood, jobs, my past, a little bit about past relationships, family issues, then my marriage, then having Jude, then the journey with Jude, and then my journey with the mental health struggles and my diagnoses, and then trialing the medication, and then ultimately what worked for me, how I live now, and then some parenting advice for undiagnosed or newly diagnosed people, and then just some information around autism and ADHD, the history of that. There is a section in there about, people in the public eye who are neurodivergent and, you know, really successful. That's something I really want to push onto children, particularly high school age. Yeah, so it's called The Autistic Mom.
Why mum? Why MOM?
Yeah,
I spell mum MOM.
Yeah,
you?
I've been
Because
asked
my mum's
about
South
that.
African.
Yeah, no, the reason is because it's on Amazon. And a lot of my followers on Instagram are American or worldwide, and mum is generally a very British thing. So mum just made everyone knows what that means. Yeah. You know, English people, even though that's not what we say, you still know what it means. I
always spelt it MOM.
So yeah, that is the Autistic Mom. Yeah, and I have the Instagram and the website as well. So yeah, the Instagram, I have quite a lot of followers on there, and that is more, I'm not super active on there. That is more, so I get a lot of questions from parents because I've always spoke on Instagram about Jude. And then funnily enough, once I wrote the book, I've found that I've actually been getting more messages from either parents, well, mums, or just neurodivergent women.
Yeah.
That are either realising themselves that they're neurodivergent or are asking questions about the process because they've read the book or they want to read the book. Obviously, in the public eye now, there is a lot, the last couple of years, a lot being spoken out about this. So, yeah, people are interested in getting more knowledge and awareness, so they will come to me and ask. But I have also given a lot of advice to parents about their children. So, yeah, I just do that. It's all confidential. And I just really enjoy doing that because when 11 years ago, Jude was born, I didn't know anyone that had an autistic child. I didn't know anyone that was older and autistic. You just don't think about that. If you don't have experience, you don't think one day all these kids will be grown up autistic adults or adults with ADHD. And again, that's something now that, you know, the authorities and the health services are having to deal with and learn about as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, historically that support that children get just stopped at 18. Now parents are, you know, campaigning ongoing to stop that being the case because obviously even though, you know, it doesn't go away, it does get easier because with experience you learn how to deal with things.
That's reassuring.
More, but it never goes away. Yeah. So for example, you know, children can't control how they stim. So you know what stimming is, obviously they might be playing with a toy or jumping or flapping the hands or spinning, or that regulates the sensory systems. As they get older, they'll learn where that isn't appropriate to do it. You know, as adults, they might then get home and do it at home because that's a safe space to do it, but it's not really appropriate to do that in the middle of a supermarket. Things like that. So things like that, you just learn with experience. There was a show Inside Our Autistic Minds by Chris Packham, which was on BBC, and that shown
I watched that
some autistic adults, and that explained things like that.
So they could get home and then just be themselves.
Yes. Yeah, and that explained that. I mean, you know, hopefully in the future we won't have to hide that. But, you know, obviously because the majority of society is neurotypical, even though there's a lot more neurodivergent than what we think, the majority is neurotypical. Yeah. So, yeah, we kind of have to live within the rules a little bit.
But I feel like with, you know, your book and our social media pages and lots of other people doing it, I think we're really sharing awareness and learn and getting people to understand and educating people that stimming's okay. Do you know, I watched someone, I can't remember who it was, on TikTok or Instagram, and their child stimmed a lot. Mm-hmm. So the mum on purpose stimmed with the child, and it made the child so happy because Yeah, my son stims a lot, and
Does he?
Yeah, a lot. He rocks all the
And
time,
we should
and he bangs
never
his
stop
head.
them.
I say to him, "What are you doing?" And he'll say, "What, mummy?" And I don't know whether he's only 3.
Obviously, by the way, if it's like you said, he bangs his head.
Yeah.
Obviously, yes. If it's a danger or that's going to harm them or someone else, then yes, we do have to and explain to them why. But if it's unharmful and it's not obsessive, then we should never stop them.
But that's where I'm still trying to accept, because I'm like, what are you doing? Like, he'll be in his car seat and
it's
he
just
will
because
just
it's so different.
Rock. And I say, what are you doing? And then I'm like, actually, I just watched this TikTok and I shouldn't ask him. He needs to do it. He likes doing it. It feels good for him. Why am I stopping it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we need to know. And again, though, we're just learning as parents, though, because we've never seen that. So it is different.
How much is too much stimming?
Well, I think you just know if it becomes obsessive. So if it's interrupting them doing anything else. Otherwise, I mean, and actually, neurotypical people or not, we actually all do stim.
Yeah, I'm stimming right now. I'm picking my skin on my fingers.
Yeah,
sorry.
you can tap
I can feel myself doing
the foot, people play with the hair, people bite the nails. You know, we all do it at some point. It's just that when you're neurodivergent, you do it at a higher level and in different ways because we have higher sensory needs. That's why, you know, autistic children, my son included, often if they hug you, they will hug hard. Their pressure is very tight because they need that pressure.
That's really interesting.
On their muscles.
When I hold my husband's undiagnosed self, when we hold hands, he breaks my hand. When we're walking, if we're just having a walk or a stroll, I'm like, Josh, you're killing my hand. He doesn't know he's doing it.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't know, but he obviously needs to do it more strongly.
Exactly.
But it's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Does Jude stim?
Yeah, not as much as he used to. Again, I think like he's getting a little bit older. If he's ever had stimulatory behaviour, that has become a problem. So, for example, he used to climb, but he would want to climb on windowsills, which obviously isn't safe. Or he had a period where he was banging. But as I said, it's very hard. So if we were out in a supermarket and he'd want to be banging, you know, if it was on glass, that's not safe. Yeah. So he goes to a SEND school who have OT and SLT there on staff. So on the times where he's had, you know, excessive behaviours like that, we've spoken to them and they've wrote us like a plan of other things to do because they obviously know the reasons why he's doing that. And then they'll give us, you know, activities or things to do that will counteract, that'll give him what he needs so he doesn't have to do that. So, you know, weighted vest, he has compression leggings that he wears at home, he has a weighted vest in school, you know, rocking chairs, trampoline.
Well, it's fantastic that they can offer all these resources and tell you which ones are
toys. Good for him. Yeah, exactly.
My daughter flaps her hands a lot. It's like she's never seen her hands before.
Yes,
she looks at them and stares at them,
and she'll have them very close to her face, probably. Yeah.
I know you can't see if you're watching, but it's
something
very close to the
he
face.
has picked up that he started doing last summer, so it's nearly a year ago, that he never did before.
Yeah, but always nude ones.
Was tiptoe walking.
Oh,
now,
wow.
He'd never done that, but now since last summer, he walks constantly on tiptoes. So we are still waiting for the physiotherapy appointment because OT at school looked at him. They had a physio come and look at him and they said, yeah, we can see that. Our concern, again, we're not bothered what he looks like. Our concern is that the muscles in his legs and his feet will be sore.
Yes.
So we do give him massage every night. But that constantly being on your tiptoes must be a killer for your calves.
I mean, what we like in hills for 5 minutes.
Exactly.
So I can only imagine.
So we're waiting on a physio from the local child development centre. But obviously, like with all those services, the waiting list is crazy.
Well, that's the other question I was going to ask you. How was your fight or struggle, or were there any, getting Jude into a SEND school?
Oh, yeah. So we...
By that tone, not great.
Yeah, well, he went to a mainstream preschool when he was 3. Because, you know, at that age, not all kids talk a lot anyway. They're, you know... And he's actually never had a meltdown. He doesn't display a lot of typical autistic traits. It's just the communication and the social side. So he went to a preschool, mainstream preschool. We then decided to send him to a mainstream school.
Yeah.
And that was our choice. I did go and look at SEND schools. I looked at mainstream schools. He went to our local mainstream school in reception because he got a one-to-one full-time because he had an EHCP then and his diagnosis ready for then. When he moved, and he was fine, and I don't regret that decision because he was in a open class with 60 kids.
Yeah.
And that, again, got him used to being around that level of noise and children, and I'm sure that helped him. When he moved to year 1, like that's a big transition for all kids because you then have to learn to sit at a desk and work, which another story. I don't agree with that for any kids anyway. I think it's too young. But he then struggled with that and had to be taken out of the class more than he was in it so that he could have a break and do sensory activities. So then we had to make the decision, which was very hard, to put him in a SEND school, but then it was finding the right one, and yet it was a whole battle with the local authority with regards to funding because I wouldn't just accept what they were offering me, which again a lot of parents don't know, that you don't have to accept what you're given and just get given anything and be grateful for it. If you find a school that you think is right and best for your child, and there is, physically space for them, then you can fight for the authority to fund that. Yeah. And that is what I had to do. At first, it was refused. I went to the Education Rights Service, then went to the Tribunal Service. But then once it went to them, the authority changed their mind and said that he could go there. Oh, and it's amazing.
Yeah. Best decision.
Yes, and it was something I didn't really want for him. Again, I think just because of the stigma. When I was a child, if you'd been to a special school, it was like a huge derogatory thing, which isn't the case now. And also, you have to let go of that stigma of what other people think. It's best for him. The staff are all, trained. The kids around him are very similar. There's more high functioning than him. There's lower functioning than him. But it's the resources. They have a hydrotherapy pool, trampoline, sensory room, like just all different things. But they also tailor the curriculum to them. So, yeah, it's definitely the best thing we ever did. And he loves it. So I would recommend it to get your child if they, are at a high level that is needed.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
One last subject I really want to talk about. It's ADHD and women.
Yes.
Now that you have a diagnosis, just a genuine question. I think we asked Josh White on our podcast. Yeah. When you have an ADHD diagnosis and now it's genuinely trendy to have ADHD and it's all over social media, what's your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Well, it's a hard one. I do think that definitely when people in the public eye started talking about ADHD in women particularly, as with anything on social media, it becomes trendy. And I think some private clinics took advantage of that, like they can with, like people do with anything, and started offering very basic assessments, which were then, they collaborated with different influencers. The influencer went there and got the diagnosis. And then, everyone and anyone went and got that because they just wanted that label because it was trendy. Yeah. Number one, it's like with any disability, physical or mental, doing that, takes away the seriousness of the struggles of people who genuinely do have it. Yeah. And then impacts on the services that we get, because say just 3 years ago when I got assessed, the waiting list was like a year and a half. It's now in my area, it's different in all different areas, but in my area it's now 4 years.
Crazy.
And I've been told by a good source that a lot of that is because if you're on the waiting list for an NHS assessment and then you go for a private diagnosis, when you get to the top of the list and then want to move over to NHS, they will still assess you under their assessment then.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you don't hit their criteria, they will accept that private diagnosis.
I quite like this.
I like that.
Because
but that's why the waiting list is high, as well as because we've got more knowledge and there's more people going for it. But that's a big reason why, because there's a lot of people on the waiting list that actually are not neurodivergent, but they're there because a private clinic has told them that they are. But when they get through to the NHS and a thorough assessment is done, it won't be accepted, because it is a really thorough, and that is something else I want to say to people that doubt it or are sick of hearing about it and think that everyone's getting diagnoses easily. It's not easy to be diagnosed as an adult. It really isn't. The assessments for autism and ADHD are hours and hours long. You have to provide, you either have to take with you someone who knew you as a child, so a parent, grandparent, something like that, or you have to take school reports, which is what I did. I mean, my school reports now quite clearly read that I had ADHD. But obviously at the time when I was in school, the 90s, ADHD wasn't even a medical condition. It wasn't known.
You were just tarnished.
It wasn't known until 2013, which was 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So, none of us, because I can think now a lot of people in school, particularly boys, that were definitely ADHD, but had no support because it wasn't a thing. So, that is a problem for that reason. But, like I said, you're always going to get that. That's always the case. But there also is a high need for the many people who are undiagnosed to have support, whether they're high functioning or not, to get those assessments and those diagnoses, because the trajectory for undiagnosed people, particularly females, because it is more females because they don't present as physically as males, the trajectory for them is not great in adulthood. So that's something that is a priority for me at the moment. I'm working with a high school because it's around that age, teenage years, when you start going through puberty, that you start realizing that you're different to your peers socially, but you don't know why. As I say in the book, and a lot of neurotypical females say, it's like your peers have been given a handbook on how to socialize and how to make friends and how to behave, but you didn't get it.
That's really
fascinating. So you just have to copy those people around you, which females, because of the way our brains work, we are more socially aware, so we can do that easier than what boys do. And physically they show more, which is why boys are diagnosed more easily.
Well, it's known that women mask a lot more than men do.
Yeah.
And it's very true, though, because I do know a lot more diagnosed ADHD men than I do women.
Yeah, exactly. So
I just think as well, though, and I'm just, because we have children that are diagnosed, and I know, like for Callie, she's definitely going to get an ADHD diagnosis, and I know how tough it is.
Yeah.
As we all say, I know I can hold my hands up and be like, oh my God, I'm so OCD. No, I'm not. I like a tidy house. I'm not OCD.
Yeah,
and
not
it's when
like
people
the
say,
people
oh, I'm
that are
so
severe.
ADHD, like my ADHD, and it's like, no, you're not. Yeah. And I think that's where I'd love to educate people more. Just be mindful with your words.
It's when everyone says, oh, he's definitely got ADHD. Oh, he's a little bit on the spectrum.
Yeah.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
And try living in a world where you are.
Yes, because everyone, and it's this thing where people say, oh, everyone's on the spectrum somewhere. No, what it is that there are traits in everyone's personality. Everyone's different. Some people don't like to talk a lot. Some people are shy. Some people love to talk, want attention. Some people like things a certain way. And again, this is how I thought I was. That was just my personality. But obviously, once I started to struggle more because of different stresses, I realised that it was more of a problem. But yet we all are different. It doesn't mean that everyone has neurodivergence. However, there are a high number of particularly females, and it's not, I just want to make it clear that it's not that I think everyone or every girl in school who struggles or has issues needs to be diagnosed, but there definitely are a high amount, and I really want to work on helping parents and education staff spot the signs in neurodivergent females to help them, if needed, get that diagnosis so that they have the support and they don't need to go down the negative path that many neurodivergent women do, being undiagnosed. Yeah. So I'll just run through a few very like unknown signs in females, particularly
that would be great.
That education staff, parents, everyone wouldn't know, that are not typical. So in women and females, in girls. So they're quite dramatic about seemingly insignificant things, like making a mistake with their schoolwork. So if they write something out and it's wrong, they can't just put a cross through it. They'll have to rip the page out and start again. They can't.
Callie rips
they
everything.
Can't cope with any mess, or and then anything they'll get upset because it's not perfect, And they often can't understand jokes or sarcasm, which I was saying earlier. I've always had that issue. They often take things very literally, so very black and white. They have a strong desire to be perfect, look perfect, and want to impress anyone and everyone, and will become upset, anxious, and or stressed if they don't do that. So, for example, someone, a TA at a school last week said that a child wouldn't go to school because when she was leaving the house, there was a bump in her hair.
Sounds like my child.
And I know all teenage girls are funny about their appearance at some stage, but this girl really had, she wouldn't leave the house.
Meltdown.
Had a meltdown because her hair wasn't perfect and she couldn't go leave the house like that. They often notice that you'll notice that they often don't have their own opinion and preferences, and they'll usually copy what their peers like and don't like. They may become infatuated with other females they look up to and try to dress, look and behave like
You're
them.
You're summing up my child, and she's nearly 6.
Yeah. Or us, because a lot of these was me.
Yeah.
They may be the perfect student at school. This is a huge thing. They may be the perfect student at school and in other company, but when they're at home, they seem difficult, antisocial, sad, or angry, and like they want to spend a lot of time at home. This happens a lot with autistic children, where it can be described as in school, they're the perfect child, but when they get home, it's like a fizzy drink has been shook up and then they explode when they get home, because that's their comfort zone and the parents can get it, so you get the negative behaviour. Yeah. The problem with that is that then they won't, to be diagnosed, the school have to make the referral, and if the school don't see that behaviour, they can't put the referral in.
To video it,
which can't be, which isn't right and needs to change, but that's another subject. They don't seem comfortable making eye contact, which I've learned to do over the years, but with certain people it's not comfortable. And you can feel yourself forcing yourself to do it, but it's not natural in most cases, and you just learn that you have to do that. They can be overly sociable with new people or not want to be with anyone outside the family at all. So again, there's the contradiction there. They can be highly vulnerable to peer pressure as a result of wanting to fit in. This can be particularly a dangerous issue as they start to get older with regards to sexual relationships, alcohol and drug abuse. So, if they're not at the stage where they want to start, exploring relationships romantically or sexually, they might feel like they need to, though, because the peers are doing so. Yeah. So obviously that makes them vulnerable.
That so scares me as a mother. Terrifies me.
Yeah. They can have strong opinions and genuinely not understand why everyone doesn't agree with them or think the same as them. So they might come across as difficult, which is something I've struggled with. But it's just because you think that your opinion, it's not because I think I'm better than anyone else or know more than anyone else. Because I'm so literal, I'm just like, I don't literally understand why you don't agree with me. Mm-hmm. It's not because I think I'm better.
Yeah, you just don't understand.
Yeah. They compare themselves to others obsessively. They don't seem to understand certain social norms, such as being civil to someone that they don't really like or agree with. So if they don't like or agree with someone, they can't or don't want to, just smile, say hello, be busy. They will just want to ignore them. Exactly. And again, that's something I struggled with because, you know, my face will tell a million stories. I can't hide it. Obviously, if it's your boss or like something like that, you know, you've got to do it. But socially, I'm like, again, I don't understand. Well, I don't want to be around this person. I don't like them. They don't like me. So why, you know? They're excessively tired after a day at school, but can struggle to sleep at night. They may have a heightened sensitivity to noise, smells, touch, textures, temperatures, things like that. They may not seem to have any empathy for others, or they might have a high level of empathy for everyone, including strangers, which is something I struggle with. So, you know, homeless people, children that are, you know, living in poverty, I can't read the news or anything like that because I've just got such a high level of empathy that it can be a blessing or a curse, and it literally hurts me like as if I know them, you know. May have a high need for routine and become very upset, frustrated, stressed or anxious when change occurs. Can appear to be cold and have a lack of affection. Again, that's something that I have struggled with partners or family in the past, not with my son or the children in my family, but I'm not an overly like huggy person otherwise. Seem to get anxious or stressed when they have to be somewhere at a certain time, for example, an appointment or even at school. So for me, if I have an appointment or somewhere to be, that is so stressful, and then I always end up being late because I'm stressing myself out. And then with being autistic as well, I have to follow routines and then go back over them.
Vicious cycle.
Yeah. So you might notice that they don't like to be surprised or receive gifts in front of other people. It's uncomfortable. They might daydream often. They have no filter in conversations and may say or do inappropriate things.
Nails on the head.
Can feel like they're being judged even when they're not. So they have a strong sense of, oh, that person's looking at me and watching me like what I'm doing, even when that isn't the case. May seem more tired or quieter than normal after they've been out for a full day or, you know, for a day out or busy, or they've been around a lot of people. I have that. So if I take my son out, you know, for the day somewhere, the next day I'm very tired because even though I've enjoyed it, because it's not just a physical walking, it's if you think about it, if you go to, say, Blackpool for the day, the constant noise, lights, people around you, socialising, is constant for hours and hours. So then the next day you
crash,
just drained
it's like burnt
of it. So even though you've enjoyed that, you then need that quiet, and we need to allow ourselves to have that to recharge. We physically can't keep going, and we have to think of ourselves as something that needs charging, like your phone that will just die out if you don't charge it, and we need to charge by resting
and resetting
by whatever means that is for you. With ADHD, and this is me, I might physically lay still, watch a movie, read a book, whatever, but I'll also always at the same time be reading on my phone, looking at emails, researching something. And people might not think that's relaxing because that isn't to neurotypical people, but to me that is relaxing because I can't just concentrate on a movie. My mind will still always be thinking about something else. So if I'm researching something, reading something, that is actually my brain relaxing.
I mean, it all sounds so fascinating, and obviously we would love to hear so much more. But as you've said, a lot of this stuff is in your book, correct? Tell us what the name of your book is again.
So it's The Autistic Mom.
And
that you can buy on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. My Instagram is @_the AA Life _ and there's a link on there for my website, which is www.theautisticmom.net, and the links are on both of those for the book, and the reviews are on there. You can email or send a DM.
It sounds amazing.
Questions.
I can't wait to read it.
We'll also link them as well on our pages for everyone that wants to see it or buy it. But on that note, I mean, I can't wait to read it.
Yes.
When we get one.
I'm going to send that to you.
Yes, please.
Thank you so
seem
much.
Unbelievable. So
thank
you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.